Hey everyone, welcome back to the Ultimate Deck Podcast, episode 88, part 2. This one ran long with a ton of value, so we broke it up into 2 parts. This is part 2.
You're listening to the Ultimate Deck Podcast with Shane Chapman.
Okay, so yeah, let's chat about this while we get him back in here.
Yeah, I must remember this wrong because I thought that the back of that, I thought it was just a flat piece that they then pushed out. But so Scott, what you're saying is that there's actually an adapter that fits in from the back side of the ledger. Is that correct?
Yeah, on the actual pre-designed ledger, there's I believe they call it a ledger bracket, but it's designed that you put those in advance and then mount the ledger, and then the way it's designed is the joist just slides right over that.
Okay, so that sounds slick. Do they sell a tool that you can then use to punch that back of the ledger out on your own?
No, you get the L bracket if you have to put one somewhere where it's not punched.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, you just use the Fortress L bracket, and you can screw that to the joist, and then you just screw that L bracket right into the metal of the ledger.
Yeah.
So to make up for when you're off, when you're not on center.
Okay. So if you need to move a joist to an odd space, it's not pre-punched, and you use the L bracket, then it's pretty much just like doing a joist from the Trex system then, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep. The difference would be that with the Trex or the light gauge system, you've got the C shape of the joist, so it could be a little bit more difficult to set the L bracket correctly, but that's a pretty minor thing.
Yeah. So, but when you're saying that one of the knocks on Fortress is that odd joist spacing is a little bit more difficult, it's not more difficult than the Trex system, just it's kind of a bit of a finicky thing to do it. Not necessarily worse than other systems.
especially first time.
Yeah,
Beyond that, it's fine.
Yeah, and it's only frustrating because you know how slick it is when the system works, right? They made it so
too easy.
Yeah, they made it great,
exactly.
And then as soon as that doesn't work, it's like, oh, okay, well, it could be better. Okay. So, yep.
This
Seems
is
easy to
fantastic.
me.
This is a great list of things. This is good. We're doing some learning today, I'll tell you that. So now, sorry, go ahead. No, I'll let you finish your thoughts. I'm about to change direction here, so you finish your thought.
Okay. The big thing, and that was one of the things that came out of, I think that came out of the visit to the plant. With that bracket system, they cut the fasteners way down for guys in the field, so the install time's better. With those pre-punched ledger brackets they have, you're only putting one screw on each side of the joist, so you're driving 2 screws, whereas the Elevations, they want you to use an L70, so you're looking at 8 screws versus 2.
Holy boy.
Right. Okay.
I think that's very important to reduce your amount of labor on that because your material costs are so high, right? If at the end of the day you're trying to provide a deck that's $75 a square foot or $50 a square foot and your material is way up there, then your labor has to come down. You know what I mean? So
yeah.
Get rid of that. Okay. Okay, now
make it slick.
This is what most people are considering is like, do I use Trex Elevations or do I use Fortress Evolutions? You're saying there's a third not branded option that guys who haven't used steel at all probably aren't likely to start there because there's likely a bit more work in figuring it out because it's not a system per se. But tell us more about that because this sounds intriguing as well, especially from a price perspective. So tell us about just using light gauge steel as an option.
Okay. Yeah, so that's sort of the bread and butter for us now. We use the light gauge steel, which is, that's what Elevation started as, was just a light gauge C-joist. It was a couple of guys here in Colorado. They were, I think their company was Iron Deck, if I'm remembering it correctly. and Trex actually bought those guys out, brought them on as consultants, and Iron Deck became Elevations. And they took a C channel and put their special powder coating on it, and ta-da, it's a Trex product now.
Right.
It seems to be, aside from maybe the decking, how a lot of Trex products come to be. It's a lot of licensing deals or like acquisitions of other companies or whatever, right? So,
right.
And I don't know that that's the worst idea. It's like if somebody's doing it really well,
there's nothing wrong with it.
Go
buy them,
right? Yeah. You remove the competitor.
Yeah, I'm going to buy Home Depot one day.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then I know that UFP Decorators parent company, they were looking at it too, and they did not pull the trigger on buying those guys out because they couldn't actually patent it because of the fact that it's a powder coated C joist.
Nothing proprietary.
So right. So yeah, Universal Forest Products passed on it because they couldn't patent it.
Interesting. I wonder if they're working on something now. Hey, that makes you wonder. It's like they pass on that, or are they trying to do something a little bit more proprietary?
Yeah,
they're pretty on the ball. Look at him. He's smiling.
They are from some of the conversations that I've had. Yeah.
Good.
I had to sign an NDA, so stop asking so many questions.
They've got some stuff in the works.
I'm just like Shane. If you ask me about it, I'd be like, yeah, okay, I'll have the hash brown.
Right? Absolutely. But yeah, to get back to what you were saying, that's our wheelhouse. That's our bread and butter, is just the standard light gauge framing. We're using the G90 coating, so it's a special order item for us and for anybody. Structural steel, at least down here in the States, it comes with the standard is a G60 coating, so you have to just order the G90, which is a tried and true field proven coating level. The Simpson strong tie hardware for years, that's the galvanizing that they used was the G90 until the ZMAX came out. So, at least down here in Colorado, there's, we're tearing down 25-year-old, 30-year-old decks, and the joist hangers still look like it got put in a week ago.
Right. Okay. And so it's not powder coated. So you've got the bare steel look, or the galvanized steel look, which is like
the biggest. Who knows? The biggest knock I get from customers is
looks a little industrial.
Shiny.
Yeah.
Yep. The shiny is the biggest drawback typically for the consumer.
Okay. And does that change over time? Does it kind of lose its shininess and just kind of go to a more of a dull steel look, or is it stays shiny and new forever?
It stays pretty shiny.
Yeah.
The nice thing with the galvanizing is it doesn't rust. It'll get some, I don't remember the correct term, but it almost looks like a calcification. So you'll see like a little white scale build up on it sometimes.
I know exactly what you're talking about.
That cleans up pretty easy.
Efflorescence. Okay.
Yeah, something like that. Nice thing
big
is
university word right there.
Right?
See you next week, folks.
That G90.
Going for another coffee.
Point for Shane.
There you go. Yeah, the G90. I mean, I've had a couple of sticks of that stuff on the ground at the house for like a year, literally making ground contact, and you pick them up and it's got a little bit of that white scale on it, and other than that, they're good to go.
That's like the siding for Shane's garage. Just lays on the ground beside the garage for years. Eh?
If it's not on, it can't fall off. We get a lot of wind here.
Right?
Okay, so tell us about working with it. Like, what are I guess let's start with the pros. So cost is obviously one, but let's start with the pros. Let's break this down the same way.
Okay. So cost is a huge factor when you switch to just the light gauge. I know, we can talk about it in a little bit when I know when I sent you the talking points, there's if we want to call it the tipping point with the steel, which we can get to.
Yeah.
But the cost is a factor for us. It's the design capabilities that really put the standard light gauge sort of over the top. What I mean by that is you have a huge array of options. So when you're dealing with the standard light gauge, you can go from a 6-inch joist to a 14-inch joist, and you can go in the structural steel range of 18 gauge to 12 gauge.
Yep.
So there's a product that fits any application that you may need.
Right.
The big thing I think that a lot of guys don't know about that they could really benefit from is the light gauges. They don't have the problem with having to log SKUs that Trex and Fortress do. So your light gauge steel, you order that stuff. Heck, you can order that stuff almost to the inch. So, if you're working in 45s or you've got just some funky dimensions on a project, you can order you're ordering your material to fit the project instead of having to be limited to a 12, 14, 16, 18, or 20 foot stick in wood or even Elevations and Evolutions. I know the Evolutions has a little bit bigger SKU range. Mm-hmm. I know they do a 14, and the last I checked, Elevations didn't, and Fortress does an 18 foot stick too.
Okay.
The great thing for us, some of the scales of some of the projects we've done, I'm ordering 30 foot long pieces of steel for a joist, and it's, you're not dealing with having to splice or sister or any of that nonsense. And that 30 foot stick is 8 inches tall, all 30 feet.
Right. Yeah. Consistent. So I'm curious now, what's the biggest span that you've done on a steel deck, a joist span?
We've got a project up in Evergreen where the joists themselves are spanning just shy of 20 feet between the beams.
Nice.
That's crazy.
So we've got they did a finished ceiling and all that, but it's all total. It's just shy of 500 square feet that's actually free floating between the structural beams.
Beauty. Another day job.
Yeah. That was a big one.
Awesome. Okay. Any other things? Cost, availability of sizes, the fact that you can kind of limit your waste by ordering exactly what you need.
Yep.
Any other pros?
Again, the weight. Stocking it for your guys is so much easier. That job with the 30 footers, we were building ladders out of those 30 footers, and it was one guy stocking those things. We'd put one end up on the beam and lift it up and slide it into the ledger, and that was one guy setting those. Right.
And so it's basically the same profile as the Trex, is what you're saying too, 18 gauge C channel?
It's, yeah, for us, I don't like the 18 gauge. We deal in 16 gauge or higher.
Okay.
So a lot of times we're dealing with 14 gauge or 12 gauge.
Okay.
Just so that we can get the bigger spans out of it.
Okay.
Do you find there's less damage when you're working with that heavier material? Like it doesn't bend as easy, or? Yeah.
Especially 12 gauge, like, do you want to try and you get a piece of track to use for a rim or something, and those flanges are tipped in, like, you got to put in a little bit of work to open them up.
Yeah. Okay.
Good. Okay.
So,
all right. What are the knocks?
Other big pros, especially for guys, the guys that are like Infinite Decks,
Never heard of them.
which thank you for, right? Yeah. Thanks for that follow, by the way. Guys like that, you back in your day when you were doing the curves, Jason Russell, those guys that are doing some phenomenal stuff with board bending. You have to get that rim joist or you're back cutting the heck out of a board to get a rim, and then doing all this crazy blocking and this and that. And with the steel, you just, you put some notch cuts on the top, and that thing just folds and makes that nice rim. And it's all the same size. So you're not fighting with planing or, trying to bring one side up, push one side down. And with the length capabilities of it, you can make your arcs out of one piece. So you're not trying to deal with a splice.
Yep.
Right. Okay. We have a question in Instagram here from Quigley Cable Rail that says, how is it screwing down the deck boards? I assume it's pretty similar regardless of the system you're using, but what's it like using self-tapping clips or Cortex or whatever you use?
It's pretty much the same.
Okay. Just a slower start on the screw, basically?
It's a little slower, and it takes, they don't bite as fast.
What's your go-to fastener, the one that you're using the most?
Well, the great thing is Camo and I think you guys know about it, Camo finally put out the X clip for steel, or at least they're telling me they're going to have it to market in August.
Okay.
So we just got to use the X clip, and that's probably going to be the go-to for us now.
Okay.
Nice.
Just because it's, you can lay your whole field, with that drive system, you're not on your knees with the fasteners anymore. And, the project we're doing currently, it's a 14 gauge steel. So I was a little bit worried about those screws in the 14 gauge, but they, once the torque setting was on the drill the right way, they worked out really well.
Good. Awesome. Were you snapping any if it was over torqued? Does that happen?
The screws themselves don't necessarily snap. The big thing is the cutting tip on them will torque,
right? And
it'll torque or it'll break, and then they just won't drive. They'll just sit there and spin.
Okay.
But the only actual breakages we had was me kicking a couple of them with my big feet before we had set them.
Right. Okay. Any other pros you want to discuss before we talk about, there's obviously going to be some limitations with this as well, but anything else to add?
Man, I don't want to ramble on forever about, just, I think for most guys, like you were just talking about with how fast they're pushing the lumber through right now, it's the dimensional stability of the product. Every single piece is the same size. It's one of those things where watching some of these other guys that are doing incredible projects, and they're knocking out 1,000, 2,000 square foot projects, and I'm just like, man, how long did you spend, sorting your lumber and crowning everything and
planing your joists and yep.
Right. And it's like, yeah, steel with the asterisk is more expensive, but there's a whole lot of time savings on the other side that I think most guys are overlooking.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So we'll get to a compare. We'll get your opinion on wood versus steel here in a moment. But any cons to using light gauge steel over the systems, over Evolutions or Elevations?
Yeah. Honestly, the biggest con is that it's because it's not a system. At least for me, we're usually looking at having engineering involved.
Right.
Just because, I was talking to Michael at Simco the other day about it, and there are, in the code books, there is a small section that deals with steel framing for floor systems that a lot of times the building departments will let transition to a deck. But those charts are just so limited in terms of what they contain.
Yep.
That you're not going to get a whole lot of projects covered by the standard charts in a code book.
Yeah.
Right.
So I would say arguably the biggest con is the added cost of an engineer.
Okay. Whereas the systems already have that done.
Right.
So
both the elevations and evolutions have stamps already in place.
Yeah.
Are you finding that the cost of then getting that engineering done is offsetting the costs of the system? Because this is one of the benefits was it's cheaper, but if you then need to get it stamped, how much is that biting back into the cost savings?
It's biting back, but honestly, for us, especially on the projects that we're doing, we're more than recouping that difference.
So there'll be a breaking point probably on size of the project then, right? You know, if it's 300 square feet or less, then the engineering kind of offsets the cost. If it's bigger, then you're saving on 200 joists.
Right.
So, okay.
Right. And yeah, I mean, honestly, for guys looking to get into the game, having a relationship, finding a good structural engineer should probably be step 1 or 2 in the process.
Right.
Yep. So
we've been, go ahead, Lee.
like, just out of curiosity, what are you paying for an engineer to stamp a set of plans like that? Like, what's your, I know that it's regional, but just even for an idea.
So we usually go between like 600 to like 1,500, depending on the job.
Okay.
The engineer I work with, Remington Engineering he's in Conifer, but he's awesome. He's one of these guys that he over-engineers because I ask him to, but he is also very cognizant of value engineering.
That's huge.
And he is.
I was going to say, you didn't have to ask them to. That's just what they do. Over-engineering.
They over-engineer like
but
crazy.
The value
one
is good.
That's important.
Well, it's funny because he actually he bitches to me about the standards that I want him to engineer to.
Oh, really?
He actually chastised me a little bit on this last job for having ridiculous standards. So it's kind of turned the tables a little bit.
Yeah, that's refreshing. Yeah.
Right?
Good.
So yeah, for us, that's the range you're looking at. But again, if you get the right engineer, it makes a ton of difference. For this job we're doing currently, the architect that designed the project had hired another engineer, and the guy just didn't have any familiarity with trying to do a steel frame deck.
Yep.
It wasn't really up to snuff on helical piers.
Right.
So we got Nick involved, and he re-engineered the whole job for us. And even after we paid his engineering fees, we cut about $6,000 off the budget because of we trimmed a whole bunch of helical piers out that we didn't need. We managed to rework some of the steel.
Right.
So, it was very much value added for the client.
Right. Nice. Awesome.
Good. Okay.
So that was one of 7 talking points.
Here we go.
Here we go.
Hour and a half in.
We've covered a lot of the other ones too, so it's not like this is going to be a 7-hour podcast or anything. But the one I was intrigued about with your points you kind of sent my way was this myth about the specialty tools. So, because I think that's a fear we've talked about a little bit. It's like, you got, that's why people don't want to do it. They got to go buy a steel
track saw.
Track saw. They got to. They might need some extra tools that they maybe aren't sitting on right now, but you're saying otherwise. Tell us more about that.
Correct. Yeah, I think from what you said, like you just said, and my interactions with other builders, is there's this big concern that, oh my God, I'm going to have to make a crazy investment in all these specialty tools. And at the end of the day, the only what I would call quote unquote specialty tool you really need to be efficient is a cold cutting metal saw, which, almost all these guys that are, following the podcast or in these builder groups, they've all invested in good tools. They've all got Milwaukee's or Makitas or DeWalt's, and all 3 of those manufacturers are making metal cutting saws in the cordless platform. So your major manufacturers are on board. It's just not as well known. Like, you're not buying the metal Makita saw at Home Depot. You gotta do a little digging for it, but it's out there.
Right.
And even
all I'm hearing is like another tool to add to the war chest. I love it.
Right. I mean, that was my thing. It was an excuse to buy tools back in the day. So, but part of that.
Would you like the radio with that? You weren't supposed to ask about one more tools. Yeah, I'll take 2 radios then.
Right? And some hash browns.
And a hash brown.
But
yeah, go ahead.
And I would say honestly, the thing on the saw is that it's more of a comfort thing than an absolute necessity.
Right.
You can go to like Home Depot and you can buy a steel beam and steel joist cutting blade for a worm drive or a 7 1/4 inch circular saw, and it'll work.
Right.
It's just that it honestly beats you up.
Yeah.
Because the shavings from the cut are kind of brutal.
Right.
And that's where the metal cutting saws come in. They're designed to catch those metal chips and all that, so they're much more user friendly. And then in terms of actually having to have one to do the job, you don't have to have one.
So that'd be nice for a variety of reasons, I guess, right? One, they're not going to get stuck in your arm as you're cutting things, whatever. It's not going to get into the motor of the saw. Like, it's designed to kind of capture that. It's not going to get into the customer's lawn or embed little pieces of filings into the composite cap of the decking, whatever. So it's like worth the investment in doing that, right? And getting that saw. So what would you say then? A metal chop saw and what? A grinder? Is that what we're talking?
That's pretty much it, yeah.
And maybe a welder. Should you get a MIG welder too?
It depends on what you want to do.
Yep, sounds like it.
Honestly,
put it in the trailer.
One of my guys is actually a certified welder, and that allowed us to branch out into the structural steel. So, we're framing the joist and light gauge, but all of the beams and columns we're using are all heavy gauge structural steel. And the welding, just opened up those avenues for us.
Yep. Right. Okay. So there it is. It's not as daunting as you think, because guys will have a grinder already. That's a tool that's already in your trailer, guaranteed.
Comes in your kit.
Right.
Yeah. You bought a 7-piece Makita kit. The grinder was the one you didn't think you wanted, like that and the flashlight. You're like, I'd rather get a different. Yeah. But you got one.
Anyways.
Right.
So maybe a metal chop saw if you're planning on doing a bunch of these. If you do one, grab a blade for your skill saw.
The thing with that though is you want to make sure it's if you're looking at the chop saw style, it needs to be a cold cutting chop saw.
Okay.
Right.
I learned that the hard way. One of the projects we did, I just had I had the old abrasive blade chop saw in the shop, and was like, well, let's use this thing, and it just massacres that light gauge, and you end up with all these. It takes longer to cut than it should, and you end up with crazy flares on the steel that make it not want to sit down.
Yep.
In the track, right?
Like it's all furred like crazy. Yeah.
Yeah. We spent a lot of time cleaning up the cuts using an actual abrasive chop saw. So,
right.
If you steer away from that and you use the cold cutting metal saw, you get super clean cuts and you're good to go.
And so the only trick on that is they just the RPMs are a little bit slower, right? Like I have a chop saw that I used when I was doing interior finishing, and I used it to cut the balusters, the aluminum spindles or metal spindles, and it just turns slower. It's not super tricky. It looks like a normal chop saw.
Yep. There's just an RPM difference. That's the big difference.
Yep. Nothing to it.
So yeah, I mean, as far as install goes for the steel, you're basically looking at a metal saw, a grinder, and a impact driver or a drill with a 5/16 inch nut driver. And you can pretty much build the whole deck with those 3 tools.
Good. Well, that's awesome. That's good to dispel that myth a little bit, because like I said, 2 of those tools the guys have already for sure. They just might need that chop saw.
Yep.
Yep.
Okay.
Now, we mentioned this a little bit earlier before. and I don't know if you have more to talk on it, but the steel versus wood tipping point. What are you referring to there? Like the size of the project, or what's the tipping point you're referring to?
So I was talking to Michael about it at Simcoe, and we were looking. I was doing a comparison with him. He was talking about his standard issue is a 2x10 joist at 12 inches on center.
Yeah,
and we were getting into the discussion about spans and cost. And the point I brought up to him was, you're in a scenario like that, we're using a 2x10, you're getting, I forget what the span is. It's something like 16 feet or something like that at 12 on center.
Yeah.
And then if you end up bumping up, let's say you want to do that 18 inch or let's say you need to get like an 18 foot span or a 17 foot span out of a joist. Now you're looking at, you're bumping up to a 2x12 basically if you want to cover that same span.
Right.
And I can do, or we can do, or whoever is going to go into steel, you can get a just shy of 20 foot span out of a 2x8 steel joist. And the thing I was talking to Michael about is when you hit that sort of that magic threshold in span, you go from, at least in my market, a 20 foot 2x12 is going to run you about $80, somewhere in that ballpark for a KDAT 2x12.
Right.
And I was telling Michael, at the same token, I can get that 2x8 joist, and not only can I get it, I can span further with it, but I can order it at 18 feet versus 20. And that 2x8 joist is running me about $2.50 a linear foot. So that 18 foot steel joist comes in under $50.
Yeah.
Where that 2x12 joist is $80. So that, that $30 a joist savings, suddenly I'm buying steel for less than pressure treated.
Yeah. So especially on those jobs that require those longer spans, it's quite likely.
Yep.
So, because this is a common question, and it just popped up here again from RC Renos, is what's the cost difference between wood and steel? And if I'm hearing what you're saying correctly, it depends on the job. Like if it's a smaller job, there might be a cost differential. There might be a premium for the steel, but on a bigger job with bigger spans, you might eat that all up and come out ahead, or at least not any more money. Because what I've heard from,
at least not more.
Yeah, what I've heard from and you can clarify this more because you're more familiar with it. What I've heard from the from the framing companies mostly, or in the market, is that Trex Elevations they always kind of said it was about 4 times more than treated lumber. Fortress came out and said ours is only 2.5 times the cost of treated lumber. And now you're saying just going light gauge steel is less than that even, so you're closing the gap. At the same time, as we talked about before, with the lumber pricing going up. So it depends, I guess, is the answer. But do you have better ratios than that? Or does that sound about right for most jobs? Let's not talk about like the 20-foot span monsters. Let's say on an average 250 square foot deck, let's say whatever, it's 12 by 20, like 24 or something, right?
Yeah.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, you're still talking. I'm not sure what linear foot cost would be there. But linear a 2x8 cold rolled light gauge steel is less than $260 a linear foot for your structure, and you're ordering that to size, so you don't have the waste factor.
Mm-hmm.
And I think when Michael and I talked about it, was on a smaller project, you were talking 30, maybe 40 cents a linear foot different for the joist.
Yep. So for that, I'd go steel all day long.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, that's not, and part of that is that's not a fair comparison either, because that steel joist that I'm buying might cost me 30 cents a linear foot more. But I don't have to plane that joist.
Yeah,
no. I don't have to tape that joist. If we do cut them, we do an end cut treatment like you would do with wood.
Right.
But you can buy the cold galvanizing compound that you use to treat those cuts. Is you can buy a 6-pack and it's like $4 a can, and you can do
like
a
beer.
2,000 square foot thing with 6 cans easy.
Right. So yeah.
even on the smaller scale jobs, if you're planning and executing well, you're really getting close in cost, especially again with the light gauge, because now let's say you only need to span 12 feet. You can bump that down to a 6-inch light gauge joist and get that span.
Right. Yeah. Interesting. Okay. So cost is not, there's a lot of factors.
I want to do this so bad. Let's sell one.
Not just the linear foot cost, but there's a lot of other things that are playing into this. So, but I guess the moral of the story is it's not as much as people fear it might be. So
no, especially like you were saying, if you're looking at the branded and marketing steel, I mean, those guys they've got to pay for that marketing and branding, and the light gauge guys don't.
Yeah, exactly.
And so if you're not aware of the light gauge possibilities, I think it really opens up a lot of avenues for guys that aren't familiar with steel that want to make that transition.
Sure. Just a question that's popped into my head here as we talk about treating the end cuts and whatnot. Do you ever find, especially with the C-channel stuff, where you've driven your screws through, has there ever been a place where you've seen rust develop or maybe like drip down the screw, or like, does that happen, or is it fine? It doesn't corrode anything around the screw?
We've seen, we've got a couple of jobs now, those jobs that are 4 years old. We actually still go back to that job every year because they overlook where they do the 4th of July fireworks for the School of Mines here in Golden.
Okay.
So we go back and see that job every year, and there's not a hint of rust on that. The only time you have rust issues where it shows up typically is the shavings themselves from where the screw goes through
right
the steel itself. But the screws haven't shown the rust, other than if there's like a flake on the screw from where it drove through.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
But 4 years in, we haven't had any issues with streaking showing up or anything like that.
Awesome.
There's been a couple of times where, there's been some shavings that have been stuck in the flange that we didn't blow out with the blower.
Right.
And they'll rust, but it hasn't bled through, so you haven't seen it.
Yeah. And even that, not a big deal, right? Go back, sweep them off, use some CLR, get the rest off, good to go. Comment from Quigley Cable Oil. This is a good comment. Just did some research. If I sell my compressor and framing nailers and buy a chop saw, I'll have enough money left over to buy coffee and hash browns for the crew at McDonald's. So, but he's making a good point though. We're talking about like, what tools do I need to get to do steel framing? And it's like, well, what ones can you give up if you don't do wood anymore?
Yeah.
It may offset it, right? If you I'm guessing you want to keep a miter saw around kind of thing, but there might be some tools that you use like your power planer, for example.
You don't need the power planer.
Right.
You don't need an air compressor.
Yeah.
You don't need a spiker.
Right. So there you go. There's your chop saw. Easily.
Pretty much.
Yeah. Awesome. Okay. Now, you mentioned that there's some hidden pros of steel in our chat before. Have we talked about those already, or you got some berries tucked in your pocket?
Most of them, I think.
Okay. You got some berries in your pocket?
Just from
don't put that on Instagram.
One that a lot of guys, at least for us, one of the really big things that's nice is again going back to it, but the steel's magnetic. So you get yourself a magnetic level, and you're not. When I was framing with wood, I don't know how many times I picked the level off the framing. Yeah. And we don't deal with that anymore.
That's a great point.
So
you're a long ways, whatever, you're 10 feet or 12 feet in the air. Bong, 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 hits the ground. You're like, that thing's shot, right? It's just like.
That's like, could you see my brain working right there? Was that like,
it looked like you were picking your nose, actually.
Could you hear that too?
I could
Was
hear
it like,
that.
you heard the gears like, he's got something. He's onto something. No, I was suddenly starting to think, I was like, all these but maybe you don't need these tools, but you get these rafter hooks and whatnot on all your tools. And it's like, I wonder if that could just be like a little magnetic thing. Like it'll hook over the joist anyway if it's 1.5 inches wide, or whatever. But I was like, I wonder if there's like, instead of screwing your belt hook onto something, whatever, maybe that has a magnet and you could stick your impact to the side of the joist instead of having it hanging on your belt, right? I'll talk to the guys in Calgary that made the magnets for the deck and see if they've got some left over.
Here it is.
Something.
There you go.
I've found something.
Don't forget about those hidden magnet fasteners. That's a game changer.
Yeah. Put a magnet in the bottom of your battery pack and it's like, boom, stuck there, right?
Right?
Yeah. Bryce, who doesn't work with tools much, is like, sounds like a good idea to me.
Yeah. The other one that's especially with millennials entering the market and people that are, the environmental topics that are coming up.
Oh, those are the worst. You got lots of them in Denver.
Right.
Hey?
Are millennials actually entering the workforce, or are they just like, I thought that they were just protesting and hanging out at home?
I don't know if they're entering the workforce, but some of them are definitely hiring deck builders.
Yeah. Fair enough. Yeah, fair enough.
But one of the nice things with the steel is all your cutoffs are recyclable.
Yep.
So at the end of the day, the job we're on right now, we actually had a bunch of the cutoffs, and the homeowner knows a lady who does scrap metal recycling and donates it to a Boy Scout troop. So we had somebody come and pick up our trash for us and then donated it to somebody else.
I was just, as you're saying that, I'm like, oh my God, I didn't even think about that. But you could literally, if you wanted to, you can donate if you're a good human being, or if you're really shitty, you could sell.
And want to make money.
But for real though, if you, like over a season of decking, if you were throwing a bunch of whatever, 6-inch, 12-inch cutoffs into a bin or something like that actually has value. You could get paid from a scrap metal place for all your cutoffs.
That's a night of beer for Wade.
Yeah.
That's your Christmas party.
Afternoon.
Right?
Yeah.
I mean, as bad as the metal scrapping guys are in this market, man, you just leave it out on the curb for 20 minutes and all your waste for the day is gone.
So I wonder if because we hear it a lot here too, and especially copper, people stealing copper off anything that copper's attached to.
Yep.
I wonder if you're more at risk. Like there's always this thing, like we do a lot of deliveries, of course, and some people are a little bit weary of leaving their materials sitting on their driveway for too long. And we've never actually heard of anybody losing their materials, somebody stealing it. But I wonder if your materials are valuable like steel if you're more of a risk that somebody will roll up there, and because there's not a huge resale market for composite decking. Like if you were to go steal somebody's composite decking, you have to go on and sell it on Kijiji. There's no market out there for secondhand.
No
decking,
black market,
right? Well, no legitimate market. Whereas with steel, you actually do have like junkers that buy that stuff. You don't have to try to sell it yourself on somewhere. You can just take it to somewhere and be like, I have this. What are you paying?
So I don't think you're going to steal that because that stuff's 20 feet long. You're not rolling up there in a pedal bike and a grinder and going to cut up somebody's deck in the middle of the night when they're like, they'll wake up and be like, hey, stop cutting my deck up.
That would look sketchy, but if I rolled up with a 20-foot trailer and started loading stuff, nobody would question it ever.
Yeah, but okay.
Listen,
we think criminals are different. We think criminals are different people. I don't think a criminal rolls up in an F-350 with a 25-foot trailer and loads.
Yes, he does. He rolls up in your F-350.
Hey, he stole it. This is true. He picked it up earlier.
Yeah, those guys aren't typically selling scrap though.
yeah, that's right. They're packing cocaine into coffee beans, right?
That's right.
Last thing that guys are going to want to know: how do you sell this to customers? So when most people call, they probably haven't done the research to know that it's even an option. They're expecting you're going to frame their deck out of wood. How do you bring that conversation forward? And then how do you get them to say like, oh yeah, that's worth, if it is more money, we're spending the money for, like, how does that work? Or do you find that they don't care? It's like, if the money's the same, they're like, yeah, do whatever you think's best.
Yeah, so that was probably one of the biggest obstacles and learning curves for me personally with the steel, was how in the heck to sell it to clients. I originally started out from the structural builder side with people, and it didn't work. You'd go to somebody's house and you talk about, oh, it's so strong and it's so light and it doesn't, and people, I found that people didn't care.
They don't give a shit how heavy it is because they don't have to pick any of it up. That's you. Yeah. That's a you problem.
Oh, it weighs less? How much less is your install then? That's what they would be thinking, right?
Right. Yeah. Well, you tell people, and I can't tell you how many times I would be sitting there with somebody and like, your frame's going to last you for 30 years, no problem. And they would look at you and they'd be like, but it's shiny.
Yeah.
And
it's like,
it became, finally it was like, okay, I can't sell the construction merits of steel to people. I have to find a different avenue. And that avenue actually came through the selling the aesthetic side. And what I mean by that is that I don't know about up there, but down here and on Facebook and other places, almost inevitably going on a sales call and talking about composite decking, the client at some point in the conversation would go, well, I don't want my decking to sag. I see all these pictures online of composite decking of Trex and it sags. And that was finally when like the light went on for me and it was like, and it was, oh, well, you know why your deck sags? It's not the decking, it's that wood frame underneath. Yeah. It's got crowns, it's shrinking, it's swelling, and your decking is following the framing underneath.
Yeah.
And if we go with steel framing, you're going to eliminate that, and the money that you're putting into this product, your decking's going to stay flat and it's going to stay level for as long as you live in your house. And suddenly with that switch in the sales tactic or sales pitch, it was like, I mean, you could see the light go on for people. And they're like, oh, well, yeah, if I'm going to spend this $4 a foot for my Voyage board, I want that thing to stay flat.
Yeah. Yeah. You definitely got to find the features and benefits that are relevant to them, and the weight of it and whatever else probably isn't it. They're not working with it. Right. So there's probably a number of things that you could use that, the longevity of it, the true and straightness of it, the fact that it's not going to sag, it's not going to move. That leads me to a question here though. Do you find, so I don't know if you're using a bunch of different brands of composite or if you've pretty much kind of stuck with deckers now, but do you find that your joints on, like, say, a miter or something with steel framing stay truer than on wood framing? Because, like, the board's going to expand and contract the same amount, but there's no movement in the lumber underneath. So do you find a difference?
Yeah, we haven't had.
I totally believe you. The way you sold that right there, I believe you for sure.
Right? No, we haven't had any real issues with things pulling apart or shifting. The great thing with the steel especially is the picture frames and the breaker boards.
Yeah, that's what I'm referring to.
The gaps have stayed really true over time.
Okay.
Because of that stable substructure.
Yeah. So the composite's still going to do what composite does, but you're not also fighting the lumber shrinking and everything else. So it's not compounded.
Yeah, and I think probably people don't talk about that much when they talk about composite moving all of the time, right? It's just like, well, that's what happens. Composite moves. It's a plastic. But they're for sure not talking about the wood, and that is absolutely a factor in that.
Part of it, yeah. I don't know how much of it is the wood, but some of it, for sure.
Yeah.
And I think, honestly, one of the big issues or one of the selling points that came around when you were talking about identifying what matters to the customer is with the steel, you're able to give the customer some sort of warranty on a frame. And, there's guys out there building $300,000 projects in pressure treated, and because of the nature of wood, they can't warranty that frame or they lose their shirt.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But doesn't it last for 40 years? No problem. Warranted, like the cabinet installer told me, picked a fight with me on over time. What are you taping that for? It'll last 40 years.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, if you use the right brand of PL Premium, it creates a seal around your brad nail so that the water can't get in.
That's right. Yeah. Question in the chat here from Mitcon Deck says, what do you do for ledger attachment with steel frame on brick veneer on wood frame house? Lots of materials at play here.
Yeah. Over brick, basically.
I would say in all self-defense that I would let my engineer determine that connection.
Yeah.
Great answer. I have a question too, though.
Luckily, you have the mic, so that'll work great.
Yeah. shut Mitcon Decks down there in a hurry.
Yeah.
What do you do for rain management? So, like wood frame, it's pretty easy to install a Trex Rain Escape. What's the solution, or how do you install water control?
You could, if you really, really want to, you can still do a trough style between the joists. It's a nightmare. The nice thing with the steel is that you can do the underdeck drainage.
Right.
So you can do like a galvalume.
I guess that makes sense.
Underdeck
You're not worried about the lumber getting wet.
100%. All of the time we talked about the underdeck ones, we were like, well, it's awful because all the moisture travels on the wood and rots that out.
Yeah.
And so
that makes sense.
Yeah, that's actually one of the features we talk about with clients is that, you know, especially people that are doing, say, a second story deck, is that they've got some future proofing in there. So let's say this year the budget's only for the deck, but they really want to have that underneath space. Well, with steel, you can wait a year or 2 years and then do a retrofit underneath drainage system, and you're good to go. You don't have those concerns about the water contact. You don't have the breathability issues that a wood frame has.
Right.
And that's been a real big key.
That's awesome.
Sell the product to people.
And so that'll,
you can say, hey, in 2 years, when the budget allows, you can put a ceiling on this.
Right. And then that could counteract their concern about the shiny framing. It's like, well, what you're saving by using the LGS instead of one of these brandable marketed steel options, you could then put towards never seeing it anyway with a drainage system.
Yeah. And when I sell those decks with a rain management system or a second level, the compromise or the trade-off right now is the deck board. You sell a less expensive deck board because you don't want to have that moisture on traveling around. Like doing an underdeck oasis or a TimberTech dry space is not really it's an option, but it shouldn't be. You know what I mean? It's not as good. So you always sell like the EPDM or the Rain Escape system and then a less expensive deck board. But if you could do the frame and a great board and then in 2 years, that's awesome.
Have you done Rain Escape or EPDM troughs over top before? And if so, what are you attaching with?
We started one and then just abandoned it. It ended up being too slow.
Staple gun wasn't really penetrating the steel, eh?
Right. Yeah, actually, we was able to do an attachment. This would fall under specialty tools that you don't need but can have. I've actually got a pneumatic pinning system that does a spiral shank nail, and it fires at about 300 psi. So we could use that to pin the EPDM down. We actually use it a lot on the rim joist because we can clamp that rim joist down and shoot a nail through it. And then when we go to do the picture frame, we don't have to account for the hex head anymore. We can get that board to lay flat.
Oh yeah. Okay.
I'll bet you that would go clean through your hand at 300 PSI. Hey? Poof.
I wonder if could a riveter work for that too? Possibly?
It could. I would think. I've never tried, to be honest, but I don't know.
Yeah, interesting.
I would say, just touching back real quick on the shiny aspect, the other thing is with the steel, I see it all the time, at least here with decks that we demo, is you get people that decide that they're going to paint their deck structure when they get their house painted. So, they have these guys come through and they spray that latex paint all over those joists to make them match the house. And all they did was made that rotting process expedite because all that water's getting trapped now.
Right. Yeah.
And, with the steel frame, you're good to go. People get their house painted, no worries. Get that steel a good cleaning and then you can paint it.
Yeah. Okay. Interesting. There's a question here again from the Instagram here from RCR Reynolds. If you were to do a herringbone with picture frame, how does the backups for the boards work? And I'm assuming there would be blocking on spans.
Yeah. So just backing. I think he's looking for like, how do you do all your backing for a herringbone?
So blocking for inlays and stuff like that, it's actually pretty fast and easy if you get used to it. You can take your joist and take a piece of the track, and again, you can especially the light gauge, you can vary that. So you can do a 6-inch track, an 8-inch track, a 10-inch track, and you span that. You just basically can put that over the two joists, and you've got that nice flat run for all your blocking to land on. Kind of like if you're doing a rain escapes and you turn your 2x face up, and you just have that, you're screwing through the sides, and you got that nice flat plate
right
in a 2x,
and you just notch
you're doing
it
the
over
same
top,
thing.
Right?
No, you can just set the track over. You set the track over the two joists, and you can screw through the sides.
Yeah. So in the Fortress Evolutions case, they're pre-made mid-span blocking pieces. Are those structural enough that you could use those for picture frame blocking?
I've never tried.
Got him.
Guy thinks he knows everything.
1 hour, 54 minutes. Got him.
I personally wouldn't.
Okay.
But that being said, you can take that rim track of theirs and put that either between or on top of the two joists, and your blocking's done for the whole run.
Right. Okay.
Awesome.
Yeah, this has been so good.
Okay.
This is the longest one. Just so you know, officially, this is the longest podcast we've ever done. This is probably a 2-parter. Hey, Bryce, is this a 2-parter?
I think next week you should not be working in here. You should be building a steel deck next week.
Me?
Yep.
Nope.
Pitter patter.
Oh, he said sometimes you get little burrs in your skin. I'm soft now. I can't do that. Holy man, this has been a great podcast, at least for us. I'm sure there's going to be a lot of other people that get tons of value out of this, because this has answered a lot of questions that we have and that you're not going to get from a rep even.
Nope.
Right? Because for one, you're not going to get an unbiased opinion, but two, you're not even talking to somebody who's ever worked with it before, realistically, right?
Yeah.
Scott, was there anything else you wanted to talk about on this topic? We're already 2 hours in, so what's 3 hours?
Well, I'm
kidding, but if you want to add anything else.
I think the only thing that I missed as far as my end goes, as a positive with the light gauge, is the customizability, I guess, of the strength of the deck itself. And what I mean by that, the Joe public's not going to know, but a lot of the good builders will know that all your joist spans and your code books are based on joist deflection.
Right.
And with it's a knock. In all honesty, it can be a knock on steel because it can span, but it also has it has almost a trampoline effect if you're not careful.
Right.
They call it serviceability issues or bounciness. But the nice thing for us, especially dealing with an engineer, is I can dial that deflection into any number that I want, and we can design the project around that number.
So as it relates to that, have you found that there's a certain number, that there's a certain amount of deflection that people have come back to you and complained about? It's like, if it deflects more than a half, like whatever, the span half-inch, engineered half-inch, whatever, is there like a number where people are giving you feedback like it's bouncy, and it's like, oh, if we keep it at this number, then they don't complain?
No, I mean, honestly, we've never had a callback for that. We did do one project where I personally felt that there was just a little too much give in the middle.
McDonald's Donuts, they'll do that too.
Right?
Yeah.
Seriously. So for us now, I've just sort of put a blanket policy in with the structural engineer that we work with. And it's, hey, I don't care if we span 10 feet. I don't care if we span 30 feet. you got to design it so that our maximum deflection is 1/8 of an inch.
Okay. Yeah.
So it's
people won't feel
it's
that.
pretty crazy.
I feel like a 1/2 inch was a pretty big number when you were like, yeah, it's a 1/2 inch deflection. I was like, holy smokes. I was thinking quarter tops.
Yeah. I was just throwing numbers out.
Well, that was my thing is, especially that deck we were talking about where we're spanning 20 feet with our joist. I mean, by code, we could have 5/8 of an inch of deflection in there and still pass code.
Yeah.
But the customer gets out on that. Yeah. And they're going to be like, you built me a trampoline.
Yeah.
And so we've taken that part out of the equation for us. So, I mean, the big thing for me is, I'm running about 240. If I can stand in the middle and like jump up and down and it pretty much doesn't give, then we're good to go.
Yeah. Well, your crew's just too nice to you. No, Scott, it didn't really move. We didn't see. Hey, Kev, did you see it move? No, right? Like he's good, right? Good, yeah. It didn't. NFDI.
Yeah, no.
Kevin from NFDI says that the Ultimate Deck Shop should start selling some of their own custom steel systems. And so my question to you is, if we do, will you be our spokesperson? Will you buy steel from us? Let's do this.
Yeah. But you have to wear an adult size T-shirt.
From a retail side, for you guys, with the light gauge especially, and that super sweet assisted DIY program you got going there, for these people that are homeowners building 12 by 12, 12 by 20 boxes, it would be real easy for you guys to basically build a kit for them, like a deck in a box almost.
Yeah,
with the steel.
I wonder if we could fly you up here and do a training seminar.
Yeah, let's come up.
There we go. We'll go golfing
fire up
here
the
too.
Smoker.
Yes. Yeah. I got a brisket in the freezer right now.
All right.
This is going to end us again. This is the first time we've ever wrapped the Instagram timer twice.
Nice.
Somehow it's happening. So we'll I don't know if you have,
we don't
hold on. I have an announcement. Our second business is actually being announced soon. NFDI. What's he talking about?
I think he's selling shirts.
I think he's selling cocaine and coffee beans.
Yeah, he's probably starting a Ontario.
Have you seen? Like, he's a pretty slick looking dude.
Yeah.
Right?
Maybe he's doing hair gel.
Could be that too. That also wouldn't surprise me. Anyway, I don't think we're going to fire the Instagram back up. I think we're at the end of this here. We just hit the 2 hour mark. So that's a feat in itself. Scott, I can't thank you enough for giving us 2 hours of your time this morning, because I don't know, anybody who's actually thinking about doing steel framing, this episode is going to be pure gold for them. It's going to answer a lot of questions, and hopefully it helps. Like, hopefully you've answered questions for 300 people and don't have to deal with them on a 1-by-1 case now. Like, this will just kind of go out there to a bunch of contractors, and they can, or you can just say, like, go listen to the podcast. I talked about it already. I'm tired now for 2 months because I talked for 2 hours.
But like, it's so good. There's a lot of value in this one, and I think a ton of people are super interested in trying to get to steel. So thanks so much.
Timing this one is impeccable. Scott, is there anything else you wanted to ask us, or any questions before we sign off on this baby here?
I think we're good, man. It was a totally my honor and privilege to be with you guys. So thanks so much for having me on.
Awesome, man. Well, if Wade ever does actually make it down to the Denver area at some point, which I think is only a matter of time.
Like, I have your phone number.
You guys will have to actually make that golf trip.
Yes.
So he doesn't mind golf here and there.
Yeah, I don't mind the odd round.
Per day.
Per day. There you go.
Okay, Scott, thanks so much for joining us. Thanks for giving us your time and your knowledge and everything else. We appreciate it. And until next week, folks, take care of yourselves. Remember to go on to YouTube. Bryce has been posting up stuff in there left, right, and center. It's amazing. The Ultimate Deck Shop. See you next week.
You've been listening to the Ultimate Deck Podcast. Ultimate Deck Podcast. Brought to you by the Ultimate Deck Shop. Shop with us at www.ultimatedeckshop.com or check us out at all the social networks we can keep up with. Hit us up for any collaboration or sponsorship opportunities. Thanks for listening.